speakers have fallen into places, let's now go back on stage to meet our keynote panelists.
I come from a long line of ocean advocates, explorers, and storytellers. Despite growing climate and environmental crises, I believe today's ocean narrative can be reshaped. From now through the next decade, we can create catalytic changes that allow us to regenerate, rebuild, and restore the lost abundance of our oceans, so that by 2050, our children have the same abundance that my grandfather once knew. This is my mission.
I noticed a lack of women in my engineering classes at university. This was confirmed by my professor's concern of the lack of women in the field. So I set out to change the world by recruiting my friends, and in a few months, we had taught 124 young Australian girls how to build robots. 15 years later, RoboGals now teaches over 150,000 young women in 12 countries to be makers, and we are using technology to amplify our impact all over the world. Through writing, speaking, leading, and building, I'm on a mission to inspire others and change the world.
Floating in the airlock before my very first spacewalk, I faced kind of a ridiculous dilemma. How best to get from inside out there? The hatch is small and circular, but with all of the tools strapped to the chest of my spacesuit and the huge oxygen pack on my back, I was square. Square astronaut and round hole. It's sort of a metaphor for my entire life, really. Trying to figure out how to get where I want to go when just getting out the door seems impossible. And today, my mission hasn't changed much. Do the things that are harder. Write and teach about ideas that can help. And I'm here to help create new ways to solve the old problems and to give humanity and life on Earth new opportunities.
Can you join me in welcoming Flora and Ocean Advocate Alexandra Christo, technology entrepreneur Marita Chang, and astronaut Chris Hadfield to the panel. What an inspiring way to kick off our morning together. Three incredibly audacious, bold visions for the change that you want to see in the world. And I think something that will resonate with the Lions and Leos in the room is that audacity of vision. This is an organisation that is very familiar with that. I want to start by talking about the barriers you have to overcome to bring that vision to life. Alex, I might come to you first. When you think about your vision for conservation and what you want to see, what are the challenges to making that real?
You know, when my grandfather first invented scuba diving in the 1950s and went on to make his films about the underwater world, we had a full, abundant, diverse, and resilient ocean for him to explore and make his films about. In the past 70 years since he started, we've lost half of the life in the oceans. Half of the fish and whales and creatures that lived there at that time are now gone. And so I think that one of the most important things we can do is reconsider our ambitions, from conserving what we have to rebuilding what we've lost. And that is a shift, a paradigm shift that is representative, of course, of so many aspects of our life. When we've lost something, we have to rebuild it, and yet we haven't transferred that idea to our oceans.
I think that's such a powerful shift in paradigm, isn't it? Moving from that thinking of conserving what we once had to rebuilding and reigniting. Marita, how about for you with your vision?
Well, I'm very passionate about educating the next generation in robotics, engineering, computer science. I think that when you're wanting to work towards a really big goal, it's so important to bring people along with you. And if you're bringing all these people along with you, I think what's really important is to have all of them share in that common vision. So you're not telling them to gather wood, or you're not telling them to place that plank of wood here and nail there, and you're not telling them exactly what to do. But if you have that shared vision of longing for the horizon on the oceans, then people come along for the journey and they do whatever it takes in order to build that shared vision.
It's almost this piece around the mission and momentum without you, that idea that many people can carry it on and move it forward. Chris, how about for you with space?
I was that little boy in that picture that they just showed, and 2,500 years ago, Sun Tzu said that strategy without tactics is just the slowest way to victory, but tactics without strategy is the noise you make before defeat. To me, I've always thought it's super important to have strategy and tactics, meaning to have a goal and to have some sort of path of personal change to get yourself in a position to be able to accomplish that goal. To turn myself from a little kid living on a farm with a head full of dreams but no path, to recognize the thing you have the greatest control over is yourself. And if you really want to change the world and accomplish those goals, the thing that you have to change the most is yourself. So I've taken those 2,500-year-old words to heart, trying to accomplish the things that are important to me.
Speaking of something that changed in yourself, Chris, you shared with me that there was a moment, this is quite extraordinary, and I'm going to read it so I get the number right. You have orbited the Earth 2,650 times. You said to me that there was something that happened on your third 6-month-long flight where you had an interaction from space that changed something for you. It fundamentally changed your perspective. Can you take us to that moment? What changed?
On my first 2 space flights, we didn't have the World Wide Web. We didn't have the internet. And so if I took a beautiful picture on board the spaceship, it was on film. And it might be years before I could come to Melbourne and show it to anybody. But on my 3rd space flight, we had digital photography and we had access to social media. And so I could look out the window, take a picture, and then immediately send it. And after a few weeks of that, I thought, why don't I ask people, what do they want to see? So I sent a note to the world on social media. What do you want me to take a picture of? And the joy of it was, the most common answer that came back was, I want a picture of my hometown. At first I thought that was just kind of cute. But then I realized 2 things. Number 1, people are proud of where they're from. They try and make it beautiful. And number 2, they want to see where they fit in with everybody else. And for me, that was immensely unifying, to hear that same common voice from all around the world. It really reinforced to me what it is we're all hoping for. Some joy and some laughter, a life fully lived, and a better world, if possible, of hope and opportunity for our children. It really brought home to me the commonality of the human existence.
It's wonderful. What a beautiful message there. I can imagine it would have kept you a very busy photographer for the International Space Station as well. Alexandra, you said something moments ago that we need to reset our ambition, moving away from this idea of conserving what we've lost already too much of, and actually resetting our ambition on rebuilding. Can you talk to us about how do we go about doing that? How do we reset the vision and be bolder in our thinking?
Well, we've talked about vision. I think in terms of especially the environment and the oceans, I always say without a vision of where to go, if we want to get to a better place, we need a vision of where to go. And without that vision, we keep reacting our way into the future. And that's what we've been doing with how we've managed our ocean and also our land, our entire planet. When my grandfather was asked how he was able to do everything that he did, he responded that it was because he lived in his lucky moment in time. And what he meant by that was that after World War II, everything that he needed to be able to do what he did was there, or almost there. So he invented, he innovated on a piece of equipment that was meant to be a car part and turned it into a regulator and created scuba. He knew that people had gone from black and white newspapers to color TV, and everybody really had a TV, but there was no content. So he innovated on this very specific set of circumstances and was able to do what he did, which was to help the world fall in love with what was under the surface of the ocean that they had been unfamiliar with up until that time. And he was able to do that for 3 reasons. One, there was a global audience waiting to see what was under the surface, 70% of our planet. Number 2, the tools were there, the technology was there, but it hadn't been used, it hadn't been made into something that was fit for his purpose, and he knew how to do that. And number 3, he was able to tell stories that made people feel like they could write themselves into the story. They wanted to be part of that. They wanted to be a member of the crew of the Calypso. Today, I think we also have a lucky moment in time. We have global multitudes that are concerned about the climate, that want to rebuild our home. We have new technologies like AI and big data and digital platforms that have transformed our ability to take action. If you think about it, if you take your phone out of your pocket and you tap the glass 8 times in the right place, you can make change happen in the real world. This is something that my grandfather could only have dreamed of doing. And so that gives us the ability to take action in ways that we never could have before.
I think that's such a wonderful point, that piece too, around the lesson you've taken from your grandfather, around the impetus to make sure you continue to adapt according to the circumstances of the time. You know, the availability that colour TV gave him to tell stories in a different way, and the importance of thinking how we continue to adapt our change making and our storytelling in order to make sure we're reaching hearts and minds where they are able to be met and reached at this moment in time. Marina, it strikes me that something Alex just touched on there might resonate with what I'm keen to ask you about, which is this idea of followership. Because I think it's been so core to how you built RoboGals so successfully, inspiring people to follow the movement, something anyone who works in a volunteer organisation has a core component of what we must do. She's mentioned the idea of making people fall in love with it. But what would you say you've learned in your journey so far around what it takes to inspire people to follow what you've started?
Yeah, so I think all of us here work with a lot of volunteers, and I think what I've learned from that experience is to just demonstrate grace. I work with a lot of university student volunteers, and they've got a lot of commitments. They've got university, they've got their cause that they're passionate about, they've got their part-time jobs, and they're just stretched in all different directions. And so I try to give them a lot of grace. I try and take people at their word. So some people try and read behind what people are saying or like extrapolate different meaning into things, but I very much just take people at their word. And because I'm so straight with them, they're straight with me, and they tell me what it's like for them and what they need from me, and sometimes they might need to take a 2 or 3 week break in order to do their exams or do their assignments, and I recognize that they're just volunteering with me. It's not their #1 priority. I'm not going to make them wrong that they need to focus on their university studies, and because I give them that grace, they respond with so much love and generosity for their time after they've taken the time that they need to focus on their university exams and assignments. And so I think, that's applicable not just uni students, but people in all walks of life. You know, everyone is busy with so many commitments. Give people grace. And I think following on from that, it's also really important to just see the good in people and think of people as goodish. I mean, we all try our best. We're always trying to do the right thing, but sometimes we say the wrong thing, or sometimes we say something, it gets misinterpreted. And I think rather than holding that against that person, I mean, I know that when I say something and I say the wrong thing, I'm mortified with myself, and I think, please forgive me, please don't hold that against me. You know, I don't want that to be how you see me. I'm going to try and do better in the future. And I think we should all try and forgive people more and, yeah, extend that grace to people.
That feels so prescient for this moment in time in particular. I really appreciate that encouragement to think more about grace in leadership. Alexandra, if I can come back to you for a moment on storytelling. I think that is such an important and powerful idea. And you've already given us a couple of tools that are useful to think about in our storytelling toolkit. You know, being very thoughtful about the mediums that we're using, making people fall in love with the story, making them long to be a part of it. What else would you say makes for a really compelling story that naturally, you know, allows people to feel that sense of, oh my gosh, I want to be involved in that? Any other tips?
Well, one of the things that I've learned as I did my expeditions around the world looking at these issues is that there are things that we all have in common. One of the ones that ended up making us smile when we were looking at water issues in different countries around the world was that no matter who I was interviewing, people who were vastly different on the spectrum of the human person would always say to me over the course of the interview, water is life. And we all know that. We know it instinctively, we know it intellectually, but to have it expressed to me by all these people in the exact same way reinforced this idea that we have so much more in common than what separates us. And if we're able to tell stories that touch on our shared humanity and our shared aspirations for ourselves and our children and the places that we call home, and our hopes and dreams for the future, if we're able to tell our story through that lens, it becomes something that everybody can relate to. And it ends up creating a narrative that people can write themselves into. They can see themselves in that story. And that's always been really important to me.
And that so beautifully overlaps, Chris, with what you were saying earlier about that moment in space, realising the shared humanity of everyone wanting to see their hometown in a picture. But I want to bring you to something else that you're a big believer in, and it was quite a pivotal moment in your own career, around the moment where you realised the power of your choice and your specific choice around what to do next. Can you take us to that moment and why that's so significant for you?
I'm very much the child of stories. I grew up reading voraciously, reading fiction and science fiction, and watching Star Trek on television, and 2001: A Space Odyssey, all of these fantastic ideas in my head. But I didn't see